It was a sunny May morning in 2025 in Ouagadougou when Ibrahim Traoré's phone rang. The caller ID indicated that the call came from an international number. At the receiving end was Rebecca Santos, executive producer at CNN International, her voice laced with an electric excitement. "President Traoré," she said, "we have a special proposal. Former First Lady Melania Trump has agreed to participate in a live debate on international politics, and she specifically requested your presence." Ibrahim, by the window in the office in the presidential palace, hesitated. At 36, the young Burkina Faso leader had just gained international attention for his firm conviction-based stand. But this was a surprise. "What sort of debate precisely?" he inquired in his usual calm, diplomatic voice. Rebecca continued, "It's a special broadcast of global perspectives, a live show in which world leaders debate key global issues. Melania Trump has shown a strong interest in hearing about African development and immigration policy, and she wishes to speak directly with you." Ibrahim was interested, though also wary. Melania Trump, wife of the incumbent U.S. president, had seldom been seen in political debates and generally avoided controversy. So why now? Why him? "When is this supposed to happen?" he asked. "Tomorrow at 3 p.m., Brasilia time. It will be broadcast globally, CNN, BBC, and our partner networks. We're expecting over 200 million viewers," Rebecca replied. Ibrahim inhaled deeply. Accepting would mean stepping into unfamiliar territory, facing someone with enormous symbolic power and media savvy. Still, he agreed, and immediately summoned his senior advisors for an emergency strategy session. In the conference room, his inner circle of aides had convened, their faces a blend of anticipation and worry. Dr. Alons Ouadraogo, the foreign minister, addressed the president first. "Mr. President, it's an unprecedented opportunity, but a possible minefield as well. Melania Trump might seem shy, but she's smart and extremely strategic." Fatima Sawadago, the economy minister, nodded. "She probably receives sensitive information regarding U.S. policies, possibly even some that have not been made public as yet. We must be ready for anything." Ibrahim paced back and forth. "What do we really know about her position on Africa?" Yakuba Sawado, the advisor for communications, opened his laptop. "Her comments about Africa have been few and largely apolitical, restricted to children's education programs. She has not made any direct comments on contentious matters." Musa Kabari, the chief of staff, raised a further issue. "This could be an attempt to gauge your positions before there is a change in U.S. policy towards Africa. The discussion could be more incisive than it seems." Ibrahim paused his pacing. "Then let's take it as a test. If this is a test, we'll see her exactly what we're made of and what we believe." Ajara Traoré, the wife of Ibrahim and Burkina Faso's first lady, had been quiet until then. She finally spoke up. "You're not only representing Burkina Faso tomorrow, Ibrahim. You're articulating an entire generation of African leadership. Be yourself and be clear." That night, Ibrahim stayed late poring through policy briefs, current U.S. foreign policy, African development metrics, trade reports, and major regional tensions. He was still no wiser about why Melania had asked to debate him personally, but he aimed to discover. On the next morning, CNN's technical team set up a provisional high-definition broadcasting studio within the palace. Ibrahim, looking corporate in a Jara-drafted gray suit, supervised the last setup. "The link to New York is strong," replied Jim Morrison, the U.S. broadcast technician overseeing the transmission. "Audio and video are perfect." At the same time, on the other side of the ocean, in a leased Manhattan studio, Melania Trump was getting ready for the broadcast. She dressed in a fitted navy blue blazer and studied her notes with her advisory team. "Remember, Melania," instructed Sophie Chen, her senior advisor, "President Traoré is smart, articulate, and politically astute. Don't let him down." Melania smiled faintly. "I don't underestimate anyone. I just want to hear how he really thinks." At precisely 2:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the last checks were in progress. Anchor Anderson Cooper, who was in Atlanta, did the audio check. "Good afternoon, President Traoré. Can you hear me clearly?" "Perfectly, Anderson," replied Ibrahim matter-of-factly. "And Mrs. Trump, how's the connection from New York?" "Fine, Anderson. I shall enjoy the discussion." she replied, her subtle accent adding depth to her voice. Ibrahim adjusted his mic and gazed into the camera. Within minutes, he would sit before one of the world's most familiar faces in a live international broadcast conversation. Ajara smiled nervously in the studio corner, pride and apprehension within her gaze. She was sure Ibrahim had something important to share, even if she had no idea how the discussion would progress. At 2:58 p.m., the countdown started. Good afternoon, Anderson Cooper addressed the audience. Welcome to Global Perspectives. Today we have a special conversation between the President of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, live in Ouagadougou, and the former First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, live in New York. The cameras cut first to Ibrahim, who nodded graciously, and then to Melania, who smiled with her characteristic poise. Let's begin with you, Mrs. Trump, Anderson replied. Why did you particularly want to talk to President Traoré? Melania shifted forward in her chair. I have been tracking recent political trends in West Africa. President Traoré embodies a new wave of African leadership. I think it's significant to have a better sense of his vision and his real intentions for the continent. The stress she put on real was understated but telling. Ibrahim picked up at once on the implied distrust. Anderson went on, President Traoré, respond to this query regarding your real intentions? Ibrahim smiled kindly. Mrs. Trump, my intentions have ever been clear. I've spent the last 3 years working to construct Burkina Faso as a paragon of sustainable development, democracy, and African autonomy. There is nothing concealed. Melania arched a brow. African sovereignty is a curious thing. Does that cover turning away from alliances with developed nations? Nations with resources and know-how that could assist? It was a barbed question. Ibrahim recognized the undertone. With all due respect, Mrs. Trump, he said, the term help needs to be defined precisely. Burkina Faso is willing to entertain equal partnerships, not paternalistic arrangements. Melania's smile was icy. Equal partnerships, Mr. President? Realistically, how can a nation with minimal infrastructure and limited resources be an equal partner to industrialized countries? There was a silence. The tension was palpable. In control rooms everywhere, producers leaned forward, sensing the debate taking a more direct and combative tone than anticipated. Ibrahim gazed into the camera and hesitated. 5 seconds of quiet, long enough for people to sense the gravitas of the moment. At last, he answered in a varied tone, softer, more intimate. Mrs. Trump, may I pose a personal question to you? Startled, Melania nodded. Of course. You were a global model, yes? You established a career on your own terms and made trips all over the world? Yes, she replied, not knowing where he was leading. Now in your early 20s, just beginning, was anyone ever in doubt that a young Slovenian woman could compete with Paris or New York? Melania was quiet. Melania Trump paused. Well, yes, there was difficulty, she admitted. Ibrahim nodded. And yet you did stick with it. You proved yourself and ended up one of the most accomplished models of your generation. Isn't that something to be admired? Thank you, yes, Melania said, cautiously watching where the conversation was going. Leaning forward, Ibrahim went on. Mrs. Trump, Burkina Faso is 22 years old as a modern democracy. We are young, just as you were when you started out in modeling. We have extraordinary natural resources, gold, manganese, zinc, just as you enjoyed natural ability. We have a young, educated, resolute population, just like you had determination. The comparison seemed to disturb Melania. I don't quite see the connection, she said. The relationship, Ibrahim answered, is that you asked how a young nation like Burkina Faso could be an equal partner to developed nations. It's the same as asking how a young Slovenian woman could compete with veteran European models. The answer is the same, with dignity, hard work, and not accepting second-class status just because someone else has more experience. A silence descended upon the broadcast. Melania's mouth formed an answer, but she faltered, left speechless. Producers around the world in studios everywhere leaned in, feeling the weight of the moment. It was a silence so dramatic that global commentators would go on to describe it as the loudest silence in global television history. Anderson Cooper, sensing tension, tried to steer it back. That is an interesting point of view, President Traoré. Mrs. Trump, would you like to respond? Melania regained composure. It is a good analogy, President Traoré, but molding a nation and running one are quite different things. Ibrahim smiled kindly. You're correct, Mrs. Trump. Running a country is much more complicated. It takes more than image. It takes substance. Not show poses, but actual policies. Not nice pictures, but concrete outcomes that benefit people. The nuance of his language hit home. By not actually denigrating her, he had contrasted the depth and seriousness of political leadership with her previous experience. At the White House, President Trump, observing the debate, grumbled to his staff, "This guy is too good." Melania bit off more than she could chew. First Lady Ajara Traoré subtly covered her mouth to conceal a smile in the presidential house in Ouagadougou. She understood that she knew her husband had put thought into this, expecting this sly condescension. Trying to take the conversation in another direction, Melania stated, "President Traoré, I think we are deviating from the topic." "No, Mrs. Trump," Ibrahim answered, still calm. "I think we are exactly on point. Respect between nations and people, no matter their age or background." He went on in measured coolness. "While talking of qualifications, could I introduce some Burkina Faso accomplishments?" Melania, now guarded, nodded. "Of course. In the last 3 years," Ibrahim explained, "we've instituted reforms that cut extreme poverty by 34%, built 1,247 new schools, and introduced West Africa's first universal healthcare system. Last year, our GDP increased by 12%. He paused, allowing the numbers to register. "Mrs. Trump, as First Lady, what quantifiable policy successes would you point to?" The question hit hard. Melania stumbled for an answer. "Well, I prioritized education and anti-bullying programs." "Merit-worthy programs," Ibrahim nodded. "But can you put a number on the effect? How many kids were directly helped? What did that legislation change in response?" Anderson Cooper attempted to jump in, but Ibrahim stood his ground. "No, Anderson. Mrs. Trump critiqued my leadership on the basis of Burkina Faso's young population and economic constraints. It's only right I review her background in political leadership." Melania, clearly rattled, attempted a defense. "The role of First Lady is different." "Exactly," Ibrahim interrupted. "You've never been elected, never managed a national budget, never implemented large-scale policies, never had to make decisions that impact millions or decisions involving life and death." A silence deeper than any interview hung in the air, reverberating through studios and living rooms all over the world. Viewers knew they were seeing something historic. And then Ibrahim dropped the coup de grace, still composed and gracious. "So, Mrs. Trump, with all due respect, how does someone without elected political experience have the right to question the ability of a democratically elected president with an established record of leadership?" Melania sat in stunned silence. The moment was a quick cultural lightning rod. Social media blew up. Twitter hashtags #Melania Silence and #Traoré Moment trended internationally. Video clips of the exchange went viral everywhere. Followers applauded Ibrahim's calm, labeling it a diplomacy masterclass. Commentaries poured in. "Africa has a voice, and it's powerful. He tore her apart with facts, not anger. And this is how a real leader responds." In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim finished the broadcast with grace. "Mrs. Trump, thank you for this illuminating exchange. I hope future exchanges between us are based on mutual respect and fact-based knowledge, not assumptions." The broadcast having concluded, Ibrahim's team circled around him, jubilant. "Mr. President," Communications Advisor Yakuba Sawadogo said, "your telephone is ringing round the clock. We've had interview requests from BBC, Al Jazeera, France 24. Foreign Minister Dr. Ouedraogo added, "International reaction is overwhelmingly positive, close to 90%. In a number of African capitals, citizens are taking to the streets celebrating." But in New York, Melania stepped out of the studio visibly shaken. Her assistant, Sophie Chen, attempted to do some damage control. "Melania, we could explain that the video was cut out of context." "No," Melania broke in. "It was live. Everyone watched it." In Washington, Trump shut down the television, lost in thought. "Cancel any official response," he told his aides, "and perhaps Perhaps we need to rethink our strategy on Africa. On the other side of the Atlantic, French President Emmanuel Macron summoned an emergency session with his foreign minister. This young leader, he said, is changing Africa's role on the world stage. We must revamp our foreign policy. At top U.S. universities, professors started integrating the debate into international relations classes, a sample of assertive diplomacy from the global South. The reverberations of that single 30-minute debate were seismic. 24 hours after the debate, President Ibrahim Traoré woke up in Ouagadougou and found his phone continuously ringing. Dozens of world leaders were calling in for meetings. State visit offers, partnership, and investment pours swelled in. "Mr. President," said Chief of Staff Moussa Cabaret, entering with a stack of documents, "we've received 47 official invitations in the past 12 hours. Canada wants to discuss mining. Germany is proposing a technology agreement. China is offering an $8 billion infrastructure package." Ibrahim nodded quietly, but within he comprehended the enormity of what had just transpired. One conversation, suave, candid, and brazen, had advanced Burkina Faso's place in the world and indirectly lent voice to a new generation of African leadership. The planet would never know the continent in the same manner once more. Across all of Africa, there was a new pride and international respect. In Ouagadougou, the next morning after the historic debate, Ajara came into the presidential study with coffee in the local paper. The front page of L'Observateur Palga exclaimed, "Our president teaches the world. The people are proud, Ibrahim." While this was going on in America, the aftermath unfolded quite differently. Melania Trump had barricaded herself inside Trump Tower, refusing to issue any public statement. Her aides were desperately trying to contain the fallout from the debate and salvage her public image. At a tense crisis meeting, her advisor Sophie Chen cautiously proposed, "Madam, we must have a recovery plan. Maybe a statement of cultural misunderstanding?" Melania shook her head. "Number that would make it worse. He was right, and I was wrong. Period." Her candor shocked her aides into silence. She went on, more reflective now. "I totally underestimated this man. I figured it would be a straight talk with an inexperienced African leader. I was totally wrong." At the White House, President Trump was coming under mounting pressure to react. At a press briefing, a reporter asked bluntly, "Mr. President, what is your take on the exchange of words between your wife and President Ibrahim Traoré?" Trump, who has a reputation for acing sensitive media moments, answered with diplomacy, "Melania is a smart woman who had an open dialogue with a respected leader. Tough conversations are part of diplomacy." Globally, the debate was being touted as a watershed in North-South relations. The African Union released an official statement congratulating Ibrahim for representing the dignity, intelligence, and modern competence of African leadership. 3 months on, the effects were still being felt throughout the world. In the presidential palace, President Ibrahim Traoré was perusing fresh trade and investment deals that would revolutionize Burkina Faso's economy when a surprise call from New York interrupted him. "President Traoré," was the voice of Melania Trump. "I need to talk to you." Ibrahim, taken aback but calm, said, "Of course, Mrs. Trump. How may I assist you?" "I would like to apologize openly for the tone I employed during our debate," she said in good faith. "And most importantly, I would like to go to Burkina Faso to observe firsthand the work that is being done." The call lasted 45 minutes. Throughout their conversation, Melania showed genuine humility, which Ibrahim didn't expect. "Mrs. Trump," he said, "we all commit errors. What is most important is that we learn from them." 2 weeks after that, Melania Trump arrived in Ouagadougou for a 3-day visit that had broad international attention. Photos of her visiting schools constructed by Ibrahim's regime, meeting students, and openly complimenting Burkina Faso's progress spread throughout the globe. During a joint press conference, Melania spoke with the press with greater clarity. "I arrived with prejudices," she acknowledged, "and I depart with great respect for what has been accomplished. President Traoré and his nation are authoring a new page in Africa's history." The gesture was more than an act of personal forgiveness. It was a turning point in international diplomacy. In the wake of the visit, world leaders were forced to approach African nations with more respect, fairness, and seriousness. At Harvard University, the Ibrahim-Melania debate was incorporated as an essential case study in diplomacy courses. Professors utilized it to instruct insightful lessons on soft power, national honor, and intercultural communication. In a year, Burkina Faso was one of the world's fastest-growing economies. Ibrahim Traoré was being invited to deliver key speeches at great global stages, such as the World Economic Forum in Davos. His style of leadership, respectful but firm, diplomatic but unyielding, started to influence a new generation of African leaders. On a peaceful evening in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim strolled along the palace gardens, lost in thought. Ajara caught up with him, smiling. "You have transformed more than Burkina Faso," she whispered. "You have transformed the perception of the world towards Africa." Ibrahim gazed out into the darkness, reflective but unruffled. "I haven't changed," he said. "I've merely revealed the world who we have always been." Click like, if this story touched you. Share it if you think people need to hear it.